Hello, welcome back to the channel, and this is a channel where we give you reviews, playthroughs, unboxings, and we generally like to talk a load of bollocks about tabletop gaming in general. And in this video we're going to be talking about a worker placement game that utilises dice. We're going to be talking about Euphoria, and in this game you'll be using dice as workers. You'll be placing them out on the board that will allow you to take actions that will allow you to win the game. So in this video we're going to be giving you a very brief overview of the rules. We'll be telling you what we do like, what we don't like. We'll come back and we'll tell you whether or not Euphoria is still worth playing today and in the future. So remember, if you're new here, please consider subscribing to this channel. Leave a comment in that section down below. We'll see you after this. Bollocks. So, Euphoria. How'd you play this game? So the premise of this game is everybody is living in this futuristic dystopian society that is ruled by 4 different factions. The aim of the game is to get all of your stars out onto the board. There's 10 of them, and the first person to do that will win the game. So Euphoria is a worker placement game that uses dice. Have we said that before? At the beginning of the game you're going to get 2 dice and you will roll them. They're just generic 6-sided dice that don't look like it. The fancy designs don't actually mean anything, and you'll put them in front of you, and these are your initial workers. This is a turn-based game. You'll arbitrarily select the first player, and then when your turn comes around you'll get to do one of 3 things. You can place a worker die out onto the board, you can retrieve any or all of your workers, or you can resolve your ethical dilemma. That's what I do every minute of the day, isn't it? So if you choose to place a die out onto the board, there are loads and loads and loads of different areas where you can place them. So you could place your die out onto the commodity area. You'll place it onto the respective commodity area and you'll consult the chart, and this will give you a certain amount of benefits. So for instance, if you put your worker out onto the generator, if the number of pips that are on all of the dice, not just your dice, but all of the dice that are in the grey box area, equal 1 to 4, you'll get an energy token, and you'll also be able to move the Euphorian marker up on the allegiance track, which we'll get to in a little bit. So all of the commodity spaces at the same, they're all going to give you different commodities, and they're all going to push up on the allegiance track. So you might be able to go to the worker activation tent. This is where you're going to get extra workers to do your dirty work for you. What you'll have to do, you'll have to pay either free energy or free water. The energy represents giving these workers an electric shock, and the water means that you're going to be using one of those water cannon things to do their heads in. And if you use the electricity one, then you'll be able to reduce your knowledge by 2 and gain an extra worker. If you use the water one, you'll be able to increase your morale by 2 and gain an extra worker. These 2 tracks are fundamental to the workings of the game. Basically, you want to keep your knowledge low. Stupid workers equal more efficiency and reduce the chance of them becoming smart, unionising and running away. And you want to keep your morale high because you want to keep the stupid workers happy, right? So you see that when you go to the commodity areas and different spaces on the board, you'll be able to push the different factions markers up on the allegiance track. Every time you do this, you'll get closer to unlocking a specific benefit, and if you have a recruit of that faction, you'll be able to take that benefit when you take specific actions. Everybody is dealt 2 recruits at the beginning of the game. You'll have 1 face up that will give you an immediate benefit that you can use all the time, and then you'll have 1 face down that you'll be able to reveal at different times during the game, right? So for instance, some of the bonuses on the allegiance track may be that with the first tier bonus, if you are moving up the Subterran faction, when you place a worker on the aquifer, you'll gain 1 extra water. Or on the second tier bonus, when you activate the Wastelanders, it says when you place a worker on the Wastelander, you'll gain a resource and an artifact card. Artifact cards are very, very useful because there's going to be occasions where you're going to be able to trade 3 different artifact cards, or 2 of the same, in for being able to place a star on a board, right? So you want to get as many artifact cards as you possibly can. So there are also tunnel spaces. You'll notice on the tunnel space that there is a box with an arrow on it. This means that this is a temporary spot that you could be booted out of. If you ever have a worker booted out of a space, you'll take it back into your hand and you'll have to roll it, and you'll have to do a knowledge check. Basically, you'll count up all the pips on the dice of the workers that you have in your activation area, which is in front of you, not on the board or in your future supply. And if they total 16 or more, then they unionise, they become too smart, and one of them will bugger off. So with the tunnel space, what you'll do is you'll pay the number of resources indicated on the board. You'll move the little minor marker up one space. When it gets to a specific point on the track, that will indicate that anybody who's got recruit of that faction will be able to reveal it, and that will become active. And when the miner gets to the last spot on the board, then it opens up another action space which will be more lucrative. Like for instance, the Wastelanders tunnel will allow you to gain free electricity rather than going to the Euphorians and begging for it, right? So you'll be able to go to construction spaces. These are spaces with different types of resources on them. You'll pay the resource and you'll put your die on that spot, and then you'll have to wait for a certain amount of these spaces to be occupied. When all the spaces are occupied, depending on how many players you're playing with, like for instance, if you're playing with 5 players, you need all of them. If you're playing with 2, you're not going to need all of them. You'll flip over the construction site, and anybody that added dice to that construction will be able to place a star on the construction site, and anybody that didn't will end up getting a good old spanking, and they'll have to take the penalty that is on the card, right? So you might end up at the Plaza of Immortalized Humility, and this says you may not place workers on constructed markets missing your stars, or you might have the Cafeteria of Nameless Meat. It says you lose an extra morale when you retrieve for free, right? So these can be a real pain in the bum, and it's in your interests to not only get the stars but to avoid getting your ass kicked. So then you might want to go to the artifact market. Basically what you do here, you place your dice down, you pay 3 artifact cards, and then you'll be able to place a star onto the respective spots on the board, and you'll also be able to move that faction's marker up on the allegiance track and have a bit of a disco, because it's quite a nice place to go, right? So there's also the constructed market spot. When you've constructed a market, there'll be additional places to put your workers. The Icarites always have their markets constructed because they live in the sky, and they're sort of puffing on some sort of weird substance that I have no idea what it is. And then the final thing that you could do is you could resolve your ethical dilemma. Everyone's given 2 of these cards at the beginning of the game. You'll be able to choose one, discard the other one, and then you'll just basically be able to choose whether to support the dystopian government, or you'll be able to become a rebel, and you'll fulfill the requirements of the card, and then you'll be able to get a star for doing that, right? So the end of the game comes when a player places their final star on the board. The game will end immediately, and there's loads and loads of different tiebreakers, and basically the player who either places a star or wins a tiebreaker will be the winner of Euphoria. Build a better dystopia, innit? So what do we like about Euphoria? So the first thing that we really like about Euphoria is the theme. This is what Red Rising should have been. I did a little bit of research before playing this game and cracking it open, and I found out that Jamie Stigmaier had tried to acquire the rights for a Red Rising board game many moons ago, right? Around about the same time this board game was created. And it seems to me, I ain't got no proof about this, just a theory, right? But it seems to me that this game is what he wanted Red Rising to be. And we've played Red Rising, and this game to us feels like what it should have been. It should have been a worker placement game. There's so many different parallels between this and the premise of Red Rising that it seems pretty obvious to me that this is the game that he wanted to make but wasn't able to do so. And the theme does come across quite well, and I suppose it does help if you have an understanding of Red Rising. You can see the parallels, and it sort of anchors the theme down quite well, right? So the second thing that we really like is that the end of the games are always really tense. There's going to be a scramble for those final star spaces, and every time we played this, all of the star spaces get occupied, and there's this mad dash towards the end. Everyone is thinking that they need one more turn to win the game, right? They're going to be trying to stitch up other players by booting them out of spots, trying to disrupt their flow, and it is impossible to tell who is going to win, right? So yeah, the tense ending is really exciting in this one. Might not look it, but it is. So the next thing that we really like about Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia, is that there's a push your luck element baked into the game, with the fact that every time you take dice back off the board, you are required to roll them and do a knowledge check. So whilst you need more workers to do more actions and to get more stuff onto the board, if you do that, if you go down that road, then you are more likely to get done over, because if you roll over 16 or more, you're going to lose one of them workers. So all the effort that you've put in is going to go to waste. So there's this fine balance between having enough workers to do what you want and not having enough workers that's going to push you over the edge on a knowledge check. So it's in your interests to keep your knowledge as low as possible, but sometimes it's not always easy to do that because some of the spaces you go to are going to push that up. So it's always in the back of your mind thinking about the balance between workers and stupidity, and that sort of mirrors real life, doesn't it? Or maybe in your job, not mine. So what don't we like about Euphoria? So the first thing that we don't like about it is that going to make me sound like a bit of a hypocrite, because I don't really like the mad dash towards the end. I like the fact that it's tense. I like the fact that it's exciting. I like the fact that you don't know who is going to win. But the problem with this is that if there's someone there that knows they can't win the game, they may have the option to decide who's going to win it. And there has been occasions when we played this and a person's gone, well, wherever I place this die, that means that that person's going to be able to place a star. Or if I put it on the other spot, then that person's going to be able to place a star and they become the kingmaker. It's also a pain in the arse that the game doesn't end at the end of your turn, because if you have doubles on your workers, you'll be able to do 2 actions in the same turn, and sometimes you won't be able to do that. So this is a problem that we found with Scythe as well, another Stonemaier Games offering, that you don't actually get the same number of turns, and that is a bit of a bummer when you're talking about worker placement, you know what I mean? The next thing that we don't like about Euphoria is that it's a little bit arbitrary. It's just a bunch of tracks. You've got the knowledge track, you've got the morale track, you've got the mining tracks, you've got the allegiance tracks. It's just a bunch of tracks that you're going to be pushing markers up. And you've also got the fact that the board looks kind of muddled. It looks like a bit of a mess. Some of the spaces cover up some of the artwork, and it's almost like the mechanics are trying desperately to push the theme out. It's like 2 extroverts trying to get the camera to look at them, right? So yeah, I don't really like the arbitrary nature of this game. It would be nice if the wonderful theme just poked its head above the trenches a little bit more. So the final thing that we don't like about Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia, is the fact that the penalties on the constructed markets don't really have any effect in the later stages of the game. It seems to us that you really do need to get a few of these in the early stages of the game to avoid the penalties, but as you get into the later stages of the game, some of the penalties that are available don't really have any impact because a lot of the spaces aren't going to be used. You're not going to be going to the worker spaces because it's too expensive, and a lot of the energy is readily available because the mining spaces have opened it up. So it's almost like the effect of the penalties is neutered by the game starting out with all these options, and gradually the options get closed off and the impact of the penalty gets closed off as well, right? Not good. So to summarise, is Euphoria still worth your time and bother today and in the future? So we're going to say maybe not. This is a decent enough Euro worker placement game that has some really novel mechanics, but these mechanics drown out the theme, and as a result it suffers from a distinct lack of personality. Much of the game feels arbitrary in a sort of Feldian sense, you know, like in a lot of Feld games you're going to have a theme that is there but the mechanics are dominant. This one, it can't really make its mind up whether the theme is as important as it should be. Having said that, the tense ending and the push your luck aspect of the knowledge checks that link with the ability to place dice on the board do raise this up beyond an average game. But when playing this, you may find yourself asking, should I really be playing something else? So there you go, that's Euphoria. Remember, if you're new in, and please consider subscribing to this channel. Leave a comment in that section down below, and we'll see you next Tuesday.